Good evening to all of our members. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are here to present to you Module 5 in our series of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Healthcare. Our Module 5 is Inclusive and Courageous Leaders. We're really thrilled to bring this presentation to you tonight. I am Deborah Stamps. I am the DEI consultant for the ANNA, and really pleased to be with all of you again. With us this evening as our co-lead in all of this education that we've been providing you with the modules is Dr. Ebony Caldwell. I'd like to just share a little bit about Dr. Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell is currently the System Vice President for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at Rochester Regional Health. She's a transformative leader that has dedicated many, many years, over a decade of her career to organizational change and strategic planning with an intentional focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Her career includes work in law enforcement, politics, academia, community, and consulting, as well as healthcare. Dr. Caldwell engages in critical conversations to examine, uncover, and address historic and structural inequities. She works from the philosophy of diversity is a benefit, equity is a goal, and inclusion is an ongoing practice. She has led cross-divisional committees, task force, and leadership advisory boards to align commitment, vision, and results. In this work, she has cultivated the ability to garner the support of colleagues and embrace the gray areas as opportunities for growth. Dr. Caldwell received her bachelor's and master's degree in psychology from Medaille University and a doctorate in executive leadership from St. John Fisher University. Please welcome me, or help me to welcome Dr. Caldwell as she leads us in our education module this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stamps. I really appreciate being here with you all. This is our 5th session. Can you believe it? We've already covered foundations of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've covered bias. We've covered health equity. We've covered understanding racism. And tonight we're going to talk about inclusive and courageous leaders. So I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. If it's your first time, and then welcome back if you've joined us for any of the other modules. So same objectives. We are going to sprinkle in some common language and use the ANNA glossary of your terms. We're going to talk about bias and racism is always within our lens here when we talk about DEI. And then we're going to really focus on how it impacts healthcare, concepts and strategies to help mitigate and eradicate bias and disparities. And then most importantly, we're going to have some tools for our leaders to help build a culture of allyship. So tonight we're going to talk about modeling the way. We're going to talk about what an inclusive leader is, some relevant terms, EQ. So that's very important in all leadership. So emotional intelligence, again, some tools and strategies, and then some time for service models and question and answer. So we want to model the way, and we want to look at some leaders that have really modeled what an inclusive and courageous leader looks like. And the first one we have here is Frederick Douglass. Especially being from Rochester, Frederick Douglass has a really big impact on the work, on the city of Rochester. He's done a lot of his work right from this city. So Frederick Douglass had a deep sense of mission. He used his perspective and personal experiences as a tool to drive societal change. Douglass recognized that making a significant impact required motivating and empowering his fellow citizens, and he used his communication prowess to achieve that objective. And so he is a model for inclusive and courageous leadership. And so we're going to pray that the technology works for us here, Dr. Sampson. And then we have another inclusive leader that I'm going to talk about after we hear this clip.
The way that I think we can fix work cultures is that those who are leading have to understand that they have to be a different type of leader than the leaders that led them. You must be an inclusive leader, which means you must solicit people's voices. You must be deliberate and intentional about making sure that you have a diverse team, but more importantly, that you create an environment where people want to contribute and they will give you their best ideas. We are in a fight around innovation everywhere around the globe in every industry, and the only way that you're going to get to the very best ideas that will allow you to lead is to make sure you're getting equity around contribution from all of your people. And I do believe that's the leader's job, to create an environment where that happens. So my big piece of advice to those who are in the leadership seat today is make sure you create that environment and make sure that you train those who are going to follow you to do the same thing.
So Carla Harris is a business leader. She is a speaker and an author of the book Lead to Win: How to Be a Powerful, Impactful, and Influential Leader in Any Environment. Her words on inclusive leadership should be our North Star. Not only do we need to embody certain characteristics, but we also need to make sure that we're promoting an environment where people can all contribute, and we need to make inclusive leaders that follow us in the work that we're doing. And so it's sustainable. It's a sustainable model, inclusive leadership. It's not just what we do today. It is also about what we do tomorrow. Inclusive leaders possess and exhibit several characteristics, but six, I'm going to talk about these six because they're very important. The one that we start with is visible commitment. They have a visible commitment to their teams, to their organization, and to the people that they serve. They challenge the status quo and they hold others accountable and make diversity and inclusion a priority. They also show humility. We talked about cultural humility in our first session, realizing we can never know everything about everyone. So we have this goal and passion for lifelong learning. And then it brings out a modesty in us, and we have that capability of admitting mistakes, and then creating a space that allows contribution. Another characteristic is the awareness of bias. We really understand our own blind spots, and we can spot blind spots in the system, the flaws in the system, and then we work hard to ensure that we are working to mitigate those biases and interrupt the system. Curiosity about others. We have this innate curiosity to want to know about other people's background and experiences so that we can include them in the conversation, and then we can show empathy to understand people who are not from the same backgrounds as we are. We have inclusive leaders have cultural intelligence. They are attentive to other cultures and adapt as required. And then finally, they have effective collaboration. So that collaboration empowers us to pay attention to diversity, make those psychologically safe spaces, and then focus on team cohesion. And when we looked at the 360-degree inclusive leader assessment, and there were over 400 leaders and over 4,000 raters that talked about these six traits that are important for leaders' awareness of personal and organizational biases. And the number one factor is that determines a courageous leader are these six characteristics. But the raters also noticed that they are coupled with these other things on the other side of the screen, which is that display of openness. We want to make sure that we have empathy and perspective, and we're putting principles first. And then finally, putting the traits to work. So we don't just want to talk about them, we want to put them into action and focus on affirming and welcoming everyone into our environments and into our space. This quote really spoke to me. Leadership requires a vision, innovative thinking, and intentional effort to meet people where they are and move them forward. Inclusive leaders seek out opportunities to promote a collective commitment to DEI. So we don't want to just say it's our commitment as the leader, but we need to make sure that we're getting voices around the table to buy into the commitment so that we can then put it into action. One of our glossary terms from ANNA this time is diversity consciousness. And it's that awareness, understanding, and skill that allows us to value human differences. We also want to develop and refine our diversity skills, which helps us increase our awareness and understanding. So again, that lifelong learning process. Some components of emotional intelligence that really feed into leadership and how we in, apply our leadership in healthcare is that self-awareness. And we've talked about this from the beginning as well. Self-awareness is key to the DEI journey. We have to know where we are, and wherever we are, we have the capacity and the responsibility to be moving forward. When we have that self-awareness, it really allows us to lean in to where we're uncomfortable and then find some understanding of why we're uncomfortable. Really understanding our own backgrounds, understanding our own biases, understanding our own barriers. That self-awareness is key. Self-regulation. I love the mantra that I live by. Does it have to be said? Does it have to be said by me? And does it have to be said right now? So regulating ourselves with, even if something should flare up our emotions, we have to have that self-regulation to understand, does it have to be spoken on? Does it have to be you? And does it have to be in the moment? We also want to have that social awareness for others, different backgrounds and experiences that we might not have any idea about. That social awareness is going to be crucial with working with diverse employees, working with diverse colleagues, and working with diverse members of our community. And then relationships. It's all about relationship management. We can't do this work without building solid relationships. This work is very communal, so we can't do it alone. So we have to have those long and established relationships. Emotional intelligence in healthcare. When we think about with leaders, we want to have that enhanced communication. We want to build strong teams. Again, it's about relationships. We want to facilitate change and improve decision making. When we think about patient care, again, it's about building relationships, build a rapport with the patients, navigate stressful situations, and then also we want to foster a welcoming and affirming environment to all. So this takes us into a couple of tools and strategies we want to think about when we're striving to be and promote leaders who are inclusive and courageous. We want to make sure that we all understand what social justice is and what we're working for. It's that practice of allyship and coalition work that helps us promote equality, equity, and respect. There's a vision of society in which the distribution of resources is equitable. That's what we're working for, to make sure everyone has what they need to be successful in their health, in their jobs, in their financial situations. That's what social justice is. Social actors who have a sense of their own agency and a sense of social responsibility towards and with others and the society as a whole. So we want to make sure that everyone is getting what they need to do their best. And as an inclusive leader and a courageous leader, we're always having that social justice lens in mind. We also want to think about how we communicate and how we build trust. Communication builds trust, and then trust improves communication. So it really is a cycle that we need to continually work on. When we think about crucial conversations, there is many different acronyms out there to think about giving life to an issue by using CPR. The first part is C, is the content. The immediate issue, we want to seek to understand concerns early without emotions, to help with clarity and expectations. We never want to be working from a lens of a I got you moment, right? The P for CPR is pattern. Not the most recent, but the ongoing concern. Once a pattern emerges, it begins to erode trust. And then the R in CPR is relationship. Again, we're working to build relationships and we want them to be long lasting relationships. So, some level of trust is the basis of every relationship. That we no longer have trust, communication, um, competence, or commitment, then it begins to erode and it really does affect everything that we're trying to do. So remember to breathe life into our communication by using the CPR method, remembering the content, looking for patterns, and then always seeking to keep relationships at the forefront. There's also a trust triangle that helps us. Trust is essential and is most likely to be present and grow when you embody authenticity. And that is really being able to see and interact with the real person, with the real you. Then there's logic, believe you will use, we want to believe that our leaders will use sound, objective, and competent reasoning in their judgment. And then finally is empathy. I want to believe that my leader genuinely cares about me and my success. And so that triangle of trust is important when we're inclusive and courageous leaders. And then the 6 hats process is used to amplify creative conversations, ensuring a broad variety of viewpoints and voices are represented. And so when we think about this process as leaders, we're wearing multiple hats all of the time. So we want to make sure that we're looking at each hat and what it takes for us to be in a process mindset or a facts mindset or feeling, and all of them are valid. So we want to make sure that we're wearing the hats and we're encouraging our teams to wear them as well. The blue hat takes time to process. Some people process a lot longer. Some people are quick to jump in and understand the situation and able to articulate. But we want to make sure that we're always giving people time to wear the blue hat and take the time to process. The white hat, we want to consider and sort out the facts. The red hat, red is for feelings, is for the heart, right? So feelings are allowed, but we need to use them productively. We want to encourage passion, intuition, and hunches, but we want to apply to situations and ideas and not to people, right? The green hat is for creativity and is the hallmark of is a hallmark benefit of diversity. It helps us come up with solutions to problems to overcome cautions. And then yellow, all the pros, none of the cons, what's possible and why. And then the black hat is always caution and assessing the risk. And even though we want to be creative, we want to be open, we always have to assess the risk, it helps fight confirmation bias. So we're not just seeking to confirm everything we already know. We really are poking holes in ideas to make it stronger. And so this process helps us see things from different lenses. It helps us put ourselves in other people's shoes. And it really does give us a well-rounded process to have diversity at the table and to appreciate that diversity and how it gets us to a better outcome. And then here's the science of hope. And hope is defined by Ratner as an individual's goal-oriented expectations that include both agency, so a desire to achieve goals, and pathways, find ways to achieve them, right? And hope is important here because it's a motivating behavior. It provides psychological resources or that psychological safety we need to encourage our teams to engage. And then it promotes forward thinking and focuses on possibilities of the future. It really helps us look at what's right with you or what's right here, right? And there are several acronyms for HOPE, but I thought this one was most salient when we talk about inclusive and courageous leaders. We want to think about health, right? Our health of our leaders, the wellness of our leaders, the opportunities, prosperity, and purpose that we share, and then for everyone. Again, we are thinking we want to be equitable, making sure that this is true for everyone that we serve, everyone in our society. I also heard a speaker, Dr. Ashley Cross from the Hub 585, and she talked about the 6 principles of hope, which I thought were pretty interesting. One is hope is contagious. Hope is a cognition and it's not an emotion. So it's not just touchy-feely. Hope is really something that we can train our brains to promote and think about. She also said that hope begets hope. So if you're hopeful, then you'll have other hopeful thoughts, right? And so we want to train our brains to think more positively so that we can have a hopeful thought after a hopeful thought. Imagination and creativity are instruments of hope. The next one is hope is a social gift. So we can't do things in isolation. Remember, we talked about building relationships. So hope blossoms when we are in a social situation or a communal situation. When we're staying by ourselves and thinking through a problem, we might not be as hopeful as if we brought others in, or if we talked about our situation with others. It's a social gift. And 5th is hope is not wishful thinking, right? It really is something that happens. It's not just what you think, it's an action. We want to put action behind this hope. And then finally, hope it can be taught, right? And so we want to think about hope in terms of how we move forward, goal, reflective, agency, social supports, pathways with purposeful projects and journeys, as well as outcome. So hope can manifest in action, and it will get us to a better outcome. Is that equity centered practices that we also want to put in our tool belt as we're working toward being inclusive and courageous leaders. We always want to have these questions, use these guiding questions in the work we lead at the bedside, in the boardrooms, and beyond. Who will my decisions affect, right? So if we're thinking about that, who's at the end of my boardroom conversation? Who is this going to affect? Are they in the room? Are they at the table? Do we have their voice included? What's my locus of control, right? There are some things out of our control, but there are some things within our control. We need to know the difference. Which actions will have the greatest impact, right? We want to get the most bang for our buck, right? And try to make the greatest impact for the greatest amount of people. And then finally, what actions can I take today, right? And so we want to put ourselves in that action mode. We want to be hopeful and we want to move today. Okay. Our final section here is service models. A couple service models that we can think of are asset versus deficit. We want to, like the science of hope, we want to start with what's going right and what's going well. So an upward spiral starts with joy, passion, and hope, which inspires contentment. Downward spiral starts with powerlessness, discouragement, and blame, which breeds pessimism, right? We want to be on that upward spiral and really embrace the science of hope. So an inclusive care model. We want to talk about this. A lot of times, Deb, you remember we kind of start with what it isn't, and then we go to what it is. So to really bring it home for folks. So I'm sorry. Make sure I can. Okay. So inclusive care model is not care that is too expensive. It's not care that assumes someone's sexual orientation or gender identity, living situation, or immigration status. It's not care that is delivered in a language a person does not speak or is not their native language. It's also not care that relies on unfamiliar on or inaccessible technology. And then finally, it's not care that does not respect or treat the whole person, right? And so we really need to think about that. What is inclusive care? It's built on a culture of inclusion. We need to know the barriers that our patients face, and then we want to really be careful not to become a barrier to our patients, right? Sometimes we know the barriers, but we stick within the system and we don't want to challenge the status quo, and then we become a barrier. And so we want to be careful not to do that. It is also accessible and welcoming spaces. We want to think about social and cultural identities as well as physical abilities. It's also having materials available for patients, be it multiple languages or large print. We want to make sure that we're being inclusive in all spaces for our patients. And then it also includes the voice of its patients. Patient-centered care, considering means and access. And so an inclusive care model is what we want. We want inclusive and courageous leaders to challenge the status quo to get us to these inclusive care models. And that is what is going to promote and move us toward health equity. And so I'm going to stop here, Dr. Stamps, and see if there are any questions.
Awesome. First and foremost, thank you so much. You know, every time you share with us your strength and wisdom and experience, I definitely have different takeaways every time. When I think about the inclusive leadership and the inclusive care model, it goes beyond the patients. It's really
Yes.
what our coworkers, our colleagues need. Because if they feel that way, they're going to definitely deliver that to our patients. And so, again, thank you so much. Every time you speak, I learn.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stamps.
um,
I appreciate that.
it's definitely transferable. I don't know if we have any questions. Let me just see. It really also breeds to the fact that we have to be continuous learners.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yes.
especially in this space. As leaders, whether it's a committee, whether it's in a formal leadership role, we have to be continuously learning um, so that we can engage the people that we're serving. Um, and I think you said this in a previous session as well, that DEIJ is really a journey. It's not a destination. It's continuous. We learn about each other
Yeah.
um,
And
every
Dr.
day.
Stamps, we've said many times before that diversity is evolving every day, just like the people it seeks to serve, right? And so, in
Yes,
order to really be those inclusive and courageous leaders, we have to grow and learn along with it.
absolutely. Absolutely. And leveraging, you know, when I think about this too, I think that we have to leverage our privileges to
Right.
actually do this work.
Absolutely.
Whether it's related to race, gender, professional
Yep.
authority, um, true
I think that's a great
allyship
point.
truly involves stepping up when it's
Yep.
necessary to create that space for opportunities for others. And
I absolutely agree. So I'll say one more thing here about privilege. We know that everyone has privilege. So I think what we really have to do is understand what the privilege is, understand what ours is, and then allyship is about stepping up, but sometimes stepping back, right?
yes,
And
that's
so
true.
we'll talk about allyship next time. I think that's our next session in December. And I'm excited that you said that because I have the perfect video that I want to share.
Awesome. 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 Wonderful. Well, we don't have any questions, but this was, again, awesome. 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 You know, you opened up with Frederick Douglass, who's near and dear to us here in Rochester.
Yes.
And, you know, he had the fortitude and the perseverance, and he practiced that centeredness in the community to help benefit the greater
Yeah.
good.
And that's what it's all about. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well,
Thank you so
again,
much.
I thank you. Thank you. And thank you for those who joined us tonight. And we will see you again for our 6th module, allyship. Stay
Yes.
tuned. Thank you, Dr. Caldwell.